Oh, howdy all, grab yourself a drink. It is time for some Path of Exile discussion. Well, patch 3.20 is coming and it's going to bring the end of Arch Nemesis. I want to go through this, but I do want to start with a little bit of a warning. A lot of people are saying, hey, this is going to be the end of super rippy rares, and I think that's really wrong because the 3.13 era monster mods were very dangerous. 3.13 era monster mods simply did more than Arch Nemesis modifiers at scaling up individual things. So where a 3.13 era monster mod would grant one stat bonus to a monster, that would be very large, whereas Arch Nemesis, at least at the end, at least by 3.19.1, would be granting 3 buffs to stats that would all be pretty small. To give you a bit of an example of the difference, one monster mod that's very scary in 3.19 is Bonebreaker. Bonebreaker grants monsters 40% increased damage and 30% reduced attack speed and a number of mods that relate to stun. The old version of this mod, the old thing that was reasonably similar to it, was the allies deal substantially increased physical damage aura, and that was a 50% damage increase. It was only for physical damage, and it didn't come along with stun mods or anything like that, but it also didn't come with a 30% reduction in attack speed. Ultimately, the old version of Bonebreaker was scarier than the current version, but also tended not to stick around for as long. Anyways, that's the apprehensive part. Let's go through all of the details and see exactly what they're doing here. So the issues players often had with Arch Nemesis were keyworded mod names were not fully descriptive of what they did. Definitely agree here. You shouldn't need to know that Steel Infused is both an offensive and a defensive mod. It sounds defensive. The mods often had multiple effects bundled together, which made them harder to understand. For example, Incendiary both provided the ability to ignite, which is something you would expect, and also provided resilience against ignite and burning ground effects on death. Due to how many effects were included in a single mod, it made many encounters too complex, and the way Arch Nemesis rewards were set up meant that many players felt they couldn't just kill a monster, they had to consider if they wanted to bring a Magic Find colour along to maximise the rewards. Goals of the new system are: mods do one specific thing, mods say what they do rather than having a thematic name you must learn and remember, encounters are simplified on average while retaining interesting fights, and players are no longer required to do annoying actions to maximise rewards. All these goals are great, except, as I said, that the mods do one specific thing likely means higher numbers than we used to see in the past, and that's going to result in more rare monster associated one-shots. At least that's my expectation. We'll have to see that once the league actually goes live. So let's examine these goals individually. Mods do one specific thing. Current Magma Barrier Arch Nemesis mod does a Magma Barrier around the monster, provides Fizz to Fire conversion, physical damage added as extra fire, granted fire resistance to the monster, and it gave it some physical damage reduction. On top of that, it also spawned Volatile Flame Bloods. Now this is being changed to just provide a Magma Barrier around the monster and does nothing else. Mods say what they do rather than having a thematic name you need to learn and remember. This is definitely an improvement. For example, rather than Incendiary, which broke down into 6 properties, you would now see monsters with either Ignites or Fire and Ignite resistant. Instead of Deadeye, which did 5 separate things, you'd see Applies Random Mark, Extra Crits, or Accurate as separate unrelated mods. This is definitely an improvement because a lot of these monster mods that existed in the Arch Nemesis era did a whole bunch of things players didn't expect them to do. Take, for example, Toxic. When you hear Toxic, you think, oh, okay, this is a poison-oriented monster, but it also spawned a Toxic Volatile on death, and that was something that was somewhat out of left field. This will be an improvement if done right, but it does likely mean that the numbers will be scaled up, and that is going to be where the danger is going to come from. Encounters are simplified on average while retaining interesting fights. The pool of mods that involve interaction, like spawning volatiles or ground effects on death, have been heavily diluted by the presence of the simpler mods, and this means you'll still encounter complex fights, but they will be rarer. I think this will be an improvement in the Delve mines, where you have much less capacity to dodge, which can mean that some of the individual mods that you encounter can be very, very, very unreasonable there, because you can't just duck out of the way of something. On the flip side, crazy combinations will happen. You will still get crazy stuff like Innocence Touch Torch alongside Magma Barrier, but this will be very rare. Now, this is the best part of this. Players are no longer required to do annoying actions to maximise rewards. In Arch Nemesis, rewards were associated with individual mods. This meant that you could predict what sort of rewards you would be getting in advance. For example, if you're facing a monster that had the Entangler mod, you knew you were going to get a bunch of rare jewels from it, and maybe unique jewels as well. If there was a specific unique jewel you were chasing, maybe you would feel compelled to go and Magic Find Cull that monster instead. In some cases, you are effectively required to fetch a Magic Find colour in order to make sure you maximised the value of the monster mod you had found. This is where you had examples like Opulent in conjunction with Lunaris Touched, which would give you a boost of currency, but this would upgrade to an enormous boost if you had a Magic Find colour with you. In other cases, you'd ignore a monster completely if you knew that it would only drop rewards of no value to you. In the new system, we've added a significant pool of new rewards to rares, but the reward on that monster is hidden and not associated with a specific mod. So you don't know what type of rewards you're going to get until you kill a monster, and this is going to mean that bringing in colours is not going to feel as mandatory as it does now. In fact, it's not going to be worth it at all. Rare monsters with more mods are more likely to have these special hidden reward mods. This new reward system smooths out the spikiness that the Arch Nemesis reward system had. That last one is a good thing. However, I do want to point out that probably the worst spikiness in the game at the moment when it comes to loot is actually divination card drops and outright drops of the chase uniques like Mageblood and Headhunter. And just like the Arch Nemesis era concentrated loot goblin killing in the hands of people that had Magic Find colours, these sorts of drops of the top end divination cards are concentrated in the hands of people who are using winged divination scarabs on maps, who are juicing maps enough to justify using a winged divination scarab on them. So you have to keep that one in mind. Conclusion. The original motivation for developing Arch Nemesis was that the previous monster mod system was very out of date. Many of the mods didn't have any appreciable effect under modern balance, and there wasn't a lot of interesting gameplay possible. In our opinion, Arch Nemesis did succeed at adding a lot of new interesting mechanics to rares, but introduced the problems described above. While creating the new monster mods described in this article, we were careful to retain most of the interesting mechanics that Arch Nemesis introduced, but in a way that doesn't include a grab bag of other effects and is diluted by many other simpler mods. Now, if they get that right, that's going to be good, but I do think there'll be teething problems here. I do think we're going to see a situation where there's going to be a whole bunch of monster mods that are scaled too high, because the 3.13 era mods, for all that they were less complex than the 3.19 era ones, they were more rippy. And especially when you combine the super rippy 3.18 Atlas with monster mods more like the 3.13 era, I think we're going to see a lot of one-shots, unless GGG have really carefully thought that out. The result is a system that is very similar to what monster mods used to be like, but with much more up-to-date content and balance. Mods are simpler and say exactly what they do. While you can certainly still rarely encounter scary combinations of mods that really wake you up, it's a lot rarer than it was under the Arch Nemesis system. We feel the new system is more modern and interesting than the old system was, and is clearer and easier to understand in the heated combat than Arch Nemesis was. So in conclusion, I think that this is going to be one of those things that will make a lot of players happy on day one, and then there'll be a few problems with it that will become clear. Hopefully they can iterate on it and get it right, and also hopefully they can find a situation where players are still dying to rare monsters a fair bit, but that those deaths feel less unfair than they sometimes did, both in the 3.13 era and in the 3.19 era. That's all I've got. May your Varlobs have interesting results.